When Don Nelson drafted Chris Webber back in '93, it looked like a perfect fit. You had an outstanding player and an outstanding coach. What could possibly go wrong? Egos colliding in an irreversible explosion with ramifications that lasted for years? Yeah. How'd you know? By the summer of 1993, Don Nelson had earned Coach of the Year 3 times, as well as the honor of occasionally being called a basketball genius, which has gotta make you feel good. Maybe not as good as if they just called you a genius flat out, but still. In 5 years as coach and GM of the Warriors, he'd turned them into playoff contenders with his patented style of play, Nelly Ball. A 3-guard, 2-forward, run-and-gun small ball game that lent itself well to the Golden State crew nicknamed Run TMC. There was, however, a problem. Nelly's Warriors lacked a proper center for years, and that was keeping the team stagnant. The Warriors were only playoff participants at best. Fans were on the cusp of being annoyed. So when 7'6" Sean Bradley strode into the draft on long legs of salvation, Nelson saw all his problems disappear. With the 3rd pick overall, it seemed easy to scoop up Brett. Oh, wait. Philly had the 2nd pick and also wanted Bradley. Plus, they didn't seem to care about Nelly's well-being at all. When the Sixers wouldn't deal, Nelly set his sights on the next biggest star of the draft, Chris Webber, a power forward who had been hyped as a potential NBA star since high school. In college, he led Michigan's Fab Five to the NCAA Finals as a freshman and again as a sophomore. Sure, he made one mistake calling timeout in the finals when Michigan didn't have any. And sure, he made another mistake when he accepted money from a Michigan booster and then lied about it to a grand jury, which I guess is technically a 3rd mistake, but look, he was gonna be great for the Warriors. He was quick and agile, an expert passer, and at 6'9", 245 pounds, he was big enough to hold his own in the NBA from day one. Nelly had big plans to make him a forward center. Now, drafting him was going to be a little tricky. Orlando was planning on taking him with the 1st pick overall. Apparently, having the 3rd pick totally sucks. Nelson managed to make an 11th hour deal with Orlando that kinda mortgaged the Warriors' future. He gave up their pick, Penny Hardaway, as well as 3 future first-rounders. Webber put on a happy face as he traded hats with Hardaway on draft night, but the trade wasn't that great for him, for 3 reasons. 1, he had been pumped to play with Shaq on the Magic. 2, he knew he stood as Don Nelson's 2nd choice after Bradley. 3, and this is the big one, Chris Webber didn't want to play center. Considering the guys he'd have to guard at center, I get it. But hey, when life hands you lemons, you make lemonade. Though, it's worth noting, life was about to hand Chris Webber a whole lot of money. Move over, lemons. You see, there was no rookie salary scale back in 1993. The only thing limiting his contract? Golden State was already over the salary cap. So, Golden State got creative. Webber ended up with a contract that undervalued him in the short term, but was loaded with incentives, was nice and long, and had an opt-out clause after a year, which, yes, would decimate the Warriors if he used it, but why would he use it? His coach was excited to have him, he fits in perfectly with the team, and the team looks pretty damn good. On paper. 2 weeks into the season, Webber told journalist Rick Bucher off the record that if the owner didn't protect him from Nelson, he was going to use his opt-out clause. What was going wrong? Well, Nelson, known at the time for being a shouty, demanding coach who's hard on rookies, made no exception for the number 1 pick Webber. Nelson was used to getting the best out of underdog players. He was not used to having a star who needed positive reinforcement. Webber, on the other hand, was used to special treatment and illegal presence. Technically loans, I know. He was not used to a critical coach who seemed almost eager to hassle him. Warriors beat reporters got a front row seat to the microaggressions Nelson threw at Webber, as Rick Bucher describes on his podcast how Nelson would comment on Chris Webber's free throws even if they went in.
You know, Webber after practice would be shooting free throws and he'd miss one or make one, and Nelson he'd say something like, that was a good one, Webb. Or, no, not good, Webb.
If you're thinking, hey, that's not so bad, what about this one? During a practice, Nelson told the other players, if you can't get the money you want, it's because of that guy right there. And then he pointed at Webber. Come on, Nelly, you can't do that. It's rude to point. The holidays offered no respite. Over the break, Nelson met with the guards and told them Weber was the reason the team wasn't doing better. Which has got to be good for team morale. Imagine how good the guards felt knowing it wasn't their fault. Nelson's critiques weren't just behind the scenes at practice. He once yelled, "Why did we draft you?" at Weber in front of fans. And everything came to a very public breaking point in early February. The Warriors were leading the Hornets by 9 in the fourth. Weber threw a behind-the-back pass that was immediately intercepted and converted. Nelson left the bench to scream at Weber. Weber screamed back, airing months-long frustrations. Nelson responded by benching him for the rest of the game. A few weeks later, Bucher figured the feud was public enough and dropped his article about Weber wanting to use his opt-out clause. He kept the source of the info anonymous, but we now know it was Weber himself. Nelson did his best to downplay the article, insisting everything was fine and Bucher was a moron. But Nelly was clearly frazzled. He limited press access to the team, he called the leak self-serving, inaccurate, and referred to them as Judas. Wait, does that make him the Jesus in this metaphor? Let's not overthink it. Factions started forming within the Warriors. On Team Nelson, you had Tim Hardaway and Avery Johnson. Hardaway, out for the season with an injury, implied to the press that Weber needed to toughen up. Nelly often used Hardaway as a go-between to communicate with Weber. One thing he wanted Tim to clearly communicate: when he was back from injury, it was Tim's team, not Weber's. You can see why Hardaway sided with Nelly here. Team Weber consisted of Latrell Sprewell and Billy Owens. The three were fast friends, and Weber's feud with Nelson spilled over to them. Billy Owens complained about Nelson's coaching in the press, and Nelson promptly benched him. Though at war with themselves, Golden State played pretty well. They made the playoffs and won 50 games, which was better than last year. And, oh yeah, Chris Webber won Rookie of the Year with 17.5 points and 9.1 rebounds per game. Maybe Nelson was some sort of secret puppet master playing twisted mind games to get the best out of his players. Or maybe Webber was just so good he could put up a Rookie of the Year performance in spite of being super unhappy? There's no way to know for sure. Either way, the future looked bright, basketball-wise. 95 could be the Warriors' year. Sprewell had blossomed, Hardaway was back from injury, with Webber, Chris Mullin, and Billy Owens rounding out the top five. This is a finals-caliber team. To try and appease Webber, the Warriors traded for Ronnie Cycli so Webber could just play the four. But were they really trying to appease Webber? To get the center, they traded away Owens, Webber's friend and buffer. Owens himself thought the main reason he was traded wasn't to get a center, but because Nelson wanted to punish Webber's friends. It didn't matter. Webber's mind was made up long ago. He was using his opt-out clause. And it was 100% because of Don Nelson. The potential dominance of the 95 Warriors didn't matter to him. He'd rather be happy than on a good team. Nelson played the good guy and offered to resign. Webber dismissed the offer as a PR move. But it wasn't. It wasn't out of the goodness of his heart either. There was just a job in San Antonio he wanted more. The owner decided he wanted to keep Nelson and let C-Webb go. They signed and traded Webber to the Bullets and got Tom Gugliotta, who proceeded to have his worst season yet. Team morale was low, and Golden State was 14-31 by All-Star break, which would do it for Nelly. He was asked to resign, the polite way of firing someone. But more than just the Warriors' season was wrecked. After Webber left, they didn't make the playoffs for 12 years. Webber himself took a hit. He got a reputation of being demanding and spoiled. The press did not hold back. On the Bullets, he got to test his theory that he'd rather be happy than on a good team. He was injured for most of the 96 season. In 97, he made the All-Star team and the Bullets made the playoffs. But the next season, now the Wizards, they won fewer games and missed the playoffs. Webber wasn't the leader Washington needed on the court, and off the court, he was a headache, to put it lightly. So the Wizards shipped him off to the Kings for Mitch Richmond and Otis Thorpe. The Kings fans weren't into it. Webber's reputation had never been lower. And yes, I'm sure those Kings fans later denied these quotes, but at the time, it looked like C-Webb was more trouble than he was worth. Nelson's rep also took a hit. Plenty blamed Nelson for destroying the Warriors by driving Chris Webber out. With Webber's criticism out there, other players felt comfy speaking up about hating Nelson. The beef put an asterisk on his legacy. He's a great coach who totally blew it once. Nelson found his way back to the Warriors over a decade later. In 2006, Chris Mullin was executive VP and wanted Nelson back. Nelly's approach was a little softer this time around, and he managed to end the 12-season playoff drought. In 2008, Weber was 34 with a rebuilt knee and in the twilight of his career. There was talk of retirement, the Lakers wanted to sign him to 2 10-day contracts, but then Chris Mullin was like, I think enough time has passed. Plus, we need some offense. Nelson and Weber were reunited. They both downplayed their beef. Weber said he had mostly good memories from his rookie year. He was happy with his career, so how could he be upset with how it started? Nelson also insisted the feud was minor and behind them. Though he did go on to sort of imply it was mostly Weber's fault. And in 2018, he echoed that sentiment. Perhaps he was tired of answering questions about a single season more than 2 decades ago. Nelly and Weber had just 1 season of conflict, thanks to Weber's opt-out clause. This was a small cut of beef, but it was so spicy that the pain it caused lasted for years.
Thank you for watching. If you're so inclined, click that subscribe button. And while I have you, can I offer you more Chris Webber? We've got a beef from his college days and a collapse from his time with Sacramento. For SB Nation, I'm Clara Morris. Good night and good game.